Who could the Buffalo Bills trade for next, and how are the roster transitions going? We're breaking down that and more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, folks. Have a couple of different things to get into today. We'll start our conversation with some trade targets, some players the Bills could be interested in pulling the trigger on a trade for. Then I want to check in on the roster transition. The Bills made some big choices this offseason to move away from some players, and I want to assess how that's going. And then I do have a handful of herd mentality questions to get into later in today's conversation. So welcome in, and let's get started with some trade conversation. I know everybody loves to talk trades, and we're seeing trades happening frequently in the NFL right now. Josh Uche traded from the Patriots to the Chiefs. DeAndre Hopkins went to the Chiefs. Deontay Johnson was traded from the Panthers to the Ravens. Cam Robinson, the offensive tackle for the Jaguars, goes to Minnesota. Of course, the Bills traded for Amari Cooper. Devontae Adams was traded to the Jets. Trades are happening, and the deadline is next week, November 5th. So I think you're going to see several more moves happen between now and then, and so we got to consider what Brandon Beane can get done, if anything. And one thing that I do every single day for the Discord channel that we have, there's a herd mentality Discord channel that you can have access to with a subscription to our Substack. I have a Substack where I'm writing articles, 3 articles at least per week. This week's going to be 5, where I'm breaking down different things with the Bills and just continuing the conversations we're having here in written form. And it's been phenomenal. A lot of people have subscribed, and it's been amazing. But if you are part of the Substack, you get into our Discord channel. It's kind of a perk for being part of the Substack. And if you'd like to join the Substack, there's a link in today's show notes for you to check all of that out. But I do a daily Discord poll. And yesterday, the poll that I put out was, if Brandon Beane makes another trade, what position should it be? And let me share the results of that with you, and then we'll talk about each position and, some candidates that make sense for me. 41% of people said defensive tackle. 27% of people said safety, and 21% of people said defensive end. 41% defensive tackle, 27% safety, 21% defensive end. And I think those should be the 3 most obvious positions that Beane could trade for. And so with that in mind, let's talk about, I got like 4 candidates for each position that makes sense to me. Let's start with the number 1 spot, and that's defensive tackle. And I think that's a good spot to bring up because whether it's Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones or even the depth, I think the impact could and should be more significant, particularly from Jones and Oliver as the starters. I think they've had moments. I don't think they're playing poorly. It's just like you expected to have more impact for a couple of paid veterans that have been better in the past. And Austin Johnson certainly had his best game of the season last week against Seattle, but I think he's been mostly a disappointment. Dwayne Carter's been flashing, but he's going to be out for a bit with this wrist injury. How can the Bills beef up that interior defensive line? Well, I think there's some very logical candidates, including some players that the Bills had in for visits this past offseason. So let's get into players that I think are logical to me. That means they're on a team that you could see selling, and you could see the Bills, for one reason or another, having interest. At defensive tackle, the name that really pops for me is Sebastian Joseph Day. He plays for the Tennessee Titans, and he's a guy that is having a good season on a bad football team that's going nowhere, let's be honest. And he should be available. We've already seen Tennessee trade off 2 players, and they should continue doing that. And Joseph Day, the Bills had in for a visit this offseason, and he wound up signing with Tennessee. But I think he'd be a great addition, has some flexibility to play the nose, can play the 3 technique. I think you can push him out to even playing a 4-eye on that inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. So he gives you some versatility, good run defender, okay pass rusher, but a veteran depth piece that I think would elevate that group. So he stands out to me in a big way. Another one that stands out to me is another player the Bills had in for a visit this offseason, and that's Arik Armstead of the Jacksonville Jaguars, another team going nowhere. They traded Cam Robinson already. They have a couple of receivers that are injured. They're bad, and they should be selling, and it sounds like they are. Arik Armstead, a veteran that they signed this offseason, longtime 49er, brings a lot of length, brings versatility, probably even more versatility than I said with Sebastian Joseph Day, because they played him as a true edge, but certainly enough size to play the 3 as well. So a veteran that's had big game experience, that offers versatility, that's been a big-time playmaker in the NFL. I think he'd make a ton of sense for the Bills to consider in a trade. So those are probably the 2 most appealing names for me, the most logical names for me, and I'd love either one of them to be traded to the Bills. 2 more guys, though. Shy Tuttle for the Carolina Panthers. Athleticism, had a really good year with the Saints before he signed with Carolina entering the 2023 season, and he's had some injuries, and of course the Panthers are not good. And I think Panthers obviously should be sellers, and they are. They traded away Deontay Johnson just this week to the Ravens, and so if he's available, that's a veteran presence that gives some real penetration upside. And then Dalvin Tomlinson would be the last name I'd invoke at defensive tackle. He plays for the Cleveland Browns. He's a quality starter. He's a good nose tackle in the NFL. And I worry a little bit that Cleveland might not be aware that they're going nowhere. Jameis Winston obviously replaces Deshaun Watson. They get to 2-6, and maybe they think they have a chance. And look, the thing about the AFC right now, when you're considering the wild card spots, they're wide open. You've only got 8 teams that are 500 or better. You've only got 8 teams within a game of 500 in the AFC right now. So teams like the Colts and the Dolphins and the Jets, Chargers, Bengals, those teams are all very much in it. And I'm fearful that the Browns think that they can go on a run here. But if they don't feel that way and they're going to start selling Dalvin Tomlinson as an A-gap defender to really beef up this Bills defensive line would be very attractive for me. So at defensive tackle, Sebastian Joseph Day, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shy Tuttle, Arik Armstead. Let's go to defensive end, where the Bills are going to get a big boost this week with Von Miller coming back. And I think that's very helpful. But if you don't make a move for an interior player, a trade for an edge player opens up more opportunity for DeJuan Smoot to play inside, to kind of give you another answer there, in addition to if you want to move Rousseau inside a little bit and Epenesa. So I think that's where it could make a lot of sense to add an edge player. Plus, Casey Tuhill's still getting some run for this team. AJ Epenesa is a good player, but he's getting a lot of snaps, pushing 65-70% of snaps in games. And again, Von Miller's going to take some of that, but I wouldn't be adverse to adding a player on the edge, especially if you don't add one on the interior. Some names that make a lot of sense: Zadarius Smith from the Cleveland Browns, a veteran, a proven player. Would love to add him. Again, the same conversation about Dalvin Tomlinson, and do the Browns really view themselves as a team that is going nowhere? If they do, he would be an attractive option. I can see the Lions being in play for him as well, but a veteran that really kind of fits and can make an impact as a pass rusher. How about Azeez Ojulari for the New York Giants? That's a team going nowhere. And Azeez Ojulari is not a player they're going to be able to keep. They just traded for and paid Brian Burns. They have Kayvon Thibodeau. Azeez Ojulari is a good young player that gives the Bills, or would give the Bills, a lot of speed off the edge, but I like his power as well. A good run defender. Kind of give the Bills a different style of player that they could stand up and do some different things with, as kind of a hybrid rush player, but he's good run defender as well. Chase Young for the New Orleans Saints. I don't understand the contract that they gave him. The Saints, they're always in cap trouble, and they gave him a goofy deal, but Saints aren't going anywhere, and they need all the assets they can get moving forward. And so if Chase Young's available, I'd be interested there. And then one other guy that would be interesting, Jadeveon Clowney for the Carolina Panthers. I don't know if the Bills will be interested in Jadeveon Clowney because he's always struck me more as a paycheck guy. Kind of a lot of years will miss training camp and then sign wherever will pay him 1 year, $10 million. I don't know. He's a good player, but I just worry about him being a true culture fit for the Bills. But if they like him, I mean, he should be available and he can certainly help the run defense and the pass rush. And so I wouldn't be adverse to that as all. So at defensive ends, at Arius Smith, Azeez Ojulari, Chase Young, and Jadeveon Clowney. Then at safety, where the Bills are starting Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin, I think we can completely dismiss the idea of Mike Edwards being an option. I don't think it's going to happen. So if the Bills wanted to upgrade Damar Hamlin, which I could see that being the case, I can see them being committed to him as well as an experienced player that's in a free agent deal year and kind of wanting to let him have the opportunity to play it out. If not, there are some players that I think would make a lot of sense to trade for. Juan Thornhill and Grant Delpit, those are both players for the Cleveland Browns that I think would be good fits. Again, the Browns have to view themselves as a team that's out of it, and I think either would come in and represent an upgrade. Quandre Diggs from the Titans is good player. And obviously Tennessee, they are sellers, and Quandre Diggs can play a number of different spots, deep, low safety. He can play in the slot, good tackler, good ball skills. He'd make a lot of sense. The name that really intrigues me, though, is Ty Matthew, the Honey Badger with the New Orleans Saints. That level of like championship level experience, playoffs, playmaker, can be all over the field, still tackles, can really play the ball. That would be a fun trade if the Bills can bring in Ty Matthew here for the stretch run. So at safety, Juan Thornhill, Grant Delpit, Quandre Diggs, and Ty Matthew. I had Budda Baker written down from the Arizona Cardinals, but I mean, they're in first place. I don't think they're going to be interested in selling, but if they were, certainly add Budda Baker to the list. So there you have it, folks. Some ideas if the Bills were to make a move for a trade, some players that make a lot of sense to me. All right, coming up on the other side of it, I want to get into the roster transition that the Bills embraced this offseason and really assess how it's going. So be sure to stick with me. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with over 500 airlines and over 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOIN Bilt, BILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure you use our URL so they know we sent you there. Join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points when you make your rent payments today. All right, this next question or this next talking point is a question that was sent in for herd mentality, and I want to make a segment out of this because I think this is a great talking point. I'll read the question and then we'll break it all down. The question comes from Alex. Alex says a big talking point coming into the season was how much turnover we had. We replaced longtime starters at cornerback, safety, wide receiver, and center. Now that we're halfway through the season, do you think each replacement has been better, worse, or equal to the players they replaced? And I think this is a good conversation. And one talking point that exists in the NFL, courtesy of Bill Belichick, who's made this a common thing to discuss, and I think he's absolutely right. Bill Belichick says the most important evaluations that you have to get right as a football team are your in-house evaluations. Who you choose to extend, who you choose to let go, right? Those are players that you have a front row seat to seeing them every single day and assessing them inside your building. There's no guesswork. There's no wondering how an outside player will perform within the confines of your building. You got to get your in-house evaluations correct. And I think it's important. So this is an opportunity for us to assess how Brandon Beane has assessed his own in-house evaluations and how they're going. So let's go through each position: wide receiver, center, safety, and corner. And wide receiver, obviously moving on from Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis. You can extend that to Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy as well. Diggs, very unfortunately, tore his ACL in the last game for Houston. He's out for the season. Prior to that injury, and look, that's extremely unfortunate. And it's hard to say the Bills dodged a bullet, because I don't think you can assume that if Diggs was on the Bills, he would tear his ACL, right? It's unfortunate. So far this season, Diggs has 47 catches for 496 yards and 3 touchdowns in 8 games. What's very interesting to me about Diggs and his role this year, and that's good production. He's on pace to pushed for 90 catches and right at about 1,000 yards, right? That's not bad. 2 things really stand out. Number one is his average depth of target being 8.3. One of the things that many have pointed out, not just me, many that have no Bills rooting interest, that the verticality in Stefon Diggs' game is diminishing. And I think it's completely evidenced by his average depth of target for Houston being 8.3. That is very low. There's most years for the Bills, he's pushing 12 yards average depth of target. Last season, it was 10.5. Now it's down to 8.3. And so Diggs is still a good route runner, but it's more quick separation than it is that ability to really work the intermediate to deeper portions of the field, where he really provided a lot of value throughout his career. That, and over half of his snaps, I think 54% of his passing down snaps, come from the slot. In a lot of ways, Stefon Diggs has just become a slot receiver for Houston. Not saying that's not valuable, right? I'm not saying that's not valuable. I'm not saying he's not a good player. But I do think that there's a trajectory here to be mindful of. Gabe Davis, are you kidding? Are you kidding? Right? Like, for Jacksonville, he has 18 catches for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns in 8 games. So he's on pace for like 40 catches for 400-something yards and 4 touchdowns. They didn't pay him $13 million a season to do that, right? But it speaks to the limitations that I've been talking about for years on this podcast. You cannot view Gabe Davis as a legitimate number 2 receiver. He's too limited of a football player. And when you're going to have a limited football player and a prominent role for an offense, what does it do? It constipates your offense because there's too many limitations. I have zero, there's not a piece of me that misses Gabe Davis. And it sounds like it's personal. It's not. It's all about the skill set and the role and the value of the contract. I hope Gabe Davis does well in his life. I just don't think you can view him as and pay him as a number 2 receiver. So would I rather have Diggs and Davis, or Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir in a prominent role? Come on. Of course I'd rather have what the Bills have right now. And it's not just the skill sets and the contracts and the value. It's how the skill sets work together in this offense, and how I think it's unlocked more for Josh Allen. The efficiency for Josh Allen has never been better. And why is that? I think a lot of it is because he's not worried about 160 targets going to Stefon Diggs, and he's also not worried about this ridiculous journey to validate Gabe Davis as a true number 2 receiver in the NFL. Those burdens have been lifted. Now it's just run the freaking play. Run the play. Get your eyes in the right spot. Throw the ball to the right player. And Josh has done that better than he ever has in his career. Unmatched efficiency this season. So the black eye, the thing that hurts is that you are still committing over $30 million in cap space to Stefon Diggs this year. And that second round pick is going to be nice, but it doesn't help the Bills right now as they're trying to go on a run. So that's certainly a layer of the conversation, but I'd rather have the Bills receivers as they are right now than having paid Gabe Davis. That's gross. and the whole deal with Stefon Diggs and what it means to have him on your football team. So I'd say that's been a great transition. At center, Mitch Morse goes to the Jaguars. And Mitch has been fine for the Jaguars. I've watched him. He looks very comparable to the way he's always looked throughout his career. He's a consistent player in the NFL. But that doesn't mean it still wasn't a good idea to make the move that the Bills did. Connor McGovern moving over to center has been a really good transition. Really good. And I think the Bills' zone run blocking has been better than it's ever been. I think there has been some communication breakdowns in pass protection, but I think that's clearly gotten better over the last 3 weeks. And that's probably where you miss Mitch the most. But I think long-term and for the benefit of the run blocking, it has certainly been a good transition. Not to mention, having an opportunity to get David Edwards in the lineup as the left guard. At safety, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Poyer has had a rough go for the Miami Dolphins this year. A lot of struggles, giving up a lot of plays. The same issues we saw with kind of lacking that burst and speed showing up. And then Micah Hyde's not playing football. And who knows what the future is there. He certainly hasn't made anything official. But we felt the decline. We felt the rust last year. And I'm not going to sit here and act like Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin are high-impact playmakers. I think Rapp's a good starter. I talked about him yesterday on the podcast. He's kind of an unsung hero for this defense. I think he's a good player, and I'm satisfied with him. I think of all of the players that we're going to talk about, Poyer, Hyde, Rapp, and Hamlin, right now, Rapp's probably the best of those players. Now, is Damar Hamlin upgradable? Yeah, I think he is upgradable. And so would I maybe rather have Poyer? Okay. Maybe. And Hyde's not really an option. If Hyde was an option, he'd be on the team. So this feels a little bit like a push, but I think the real win here for the Bills is if you do identify Rapp as the best player of those four right now, having him as a starter is meaningful. At corner, moving on from Trey White, and I guess Dane Jackson in a way. Trey has really struggled for the Rams. He got roasted repeatedly in the first few games of the season. Then he was benched, and now they've given him permission to seek a trade. It's just very unfortunate. Trey White was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, one of the best personalities in the NFL. But then an ACL tear into a ruptured Achilles, that's a lot to overcome for a cornerback. And I just don't think he can run and cover at a high enough level to rely on him. So obviously the right decision for the Bills. And you hate to see him struggle like he has. The conversation with Trey White and him going to safety, I don't think it's viable because Trey White's never been a very good tackler. Maybe that can change, but I think that's if he's really going to have a chance to be a meaningful starter again, he's got to tackle, be more physical, and play safety. Dane Jackson, I don't think he's even played a snap yet for the Carolina Panthers. He had a preseason hamstring injury, and he hasn't played. Obviously, I think the strength of the Bills' defense is arguably the corner tandem of Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas. So that's gone extremely well. So for all the big talking points about the Bills moving on from Diggs and Davis and Morse and Poyer and White, I think what got lost in that conversation is it's not like the Bills were moving on from the prime version of those guys. They were all in some ways declining or not really worth the contracts. And I would say that overwhelmingly, Brandon Beane nailed those in-house evaluations. Now, I think you can have some conversations about the free agent class and where Beane probably missed on some opportunities in free agency. It's looking like a big black eye, but he got the most important evaluations right, and that was the in-house evaluations, and this roster transition is going very, very well. All right, folks, on the other side of it, we got some herd mentality questions, one about Damar Hamlin. We're talking run defense, 3 linebacker sets, and more. Be sure to stick with us. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 Get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsback app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we've got a few herd mentality questions to get to. Derek says, the conversation surrounding Damar Hamlin this year reminds me a lot of the conversation Bills fans had a couple of years ago with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson as CB2. Hamlin is a player with a solid floor who knows the system well, but is limited physically. He isn't a huge weakness for the team, but the ability to upgrade the position is obvious. And the Bills tried bringing in a more talented free agent, Mike Edwards, but due to injury or lack of trust from the coaches or whatever, Hamlin is holding on to the free safety position. That summary feels extremely similar to me to what happened at the CB2 position. Dane and Levi were both solid, familiar CB2s for the team who weren't massive liabilities, but it was obvious we could upgrade the position. The Bills brought in free agents to try to win the job, but they couldn't claim the spot over Levi or Dane. The one I recall is Josh Norman, but I'm pretty sure there were a couple of other guys brought in. I don't have a question to ask at the end of this, but I did find similarities between the two situations very interesting. Yeah, I think, Derek, I think that's a great way to frame it. Damar Hamlin is certainly a player that you feel like you can upgrade. But in a zone defense that the Bills run, that's becoming a little bit more man-oriented. Trust matters, right? Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich asked these players to play with vision and communication. And for someone to come in with 0 reps is difficult, especially when you're talking about Damar Hamlin, who is the most experienced safety in this scheme. Again, he's upgradable. There's no question. But he's not like the Bobby Hart of safeties, like I think some Bills fans paint him to be. Upgradable, preferably a depth player. But let's not act like this is the world's worst football player. And it's incredible to me to see some of the response. Like, I don't know how this happened. I really don't know how this happened. Like, Damar Hamlin might miss a tackle or give up a catch, and the next thing I know, I'm getting texts and tweets and emails. He's a liability. Get him out of here. What? Again, he's upgradable. I will not debate that. But he's not the world's worst football player, just like Dane Jackson, just like Levi Wallace. I think, Derek, you have a great point. Spencer says, could you see the Bills leaning into more 3 linebacker sets when Milano comes back? Play Spector at Sam and possibly leave Hamlin off the field with Rapp as a center fielder. Would make the defense stronger against the run while leaving Johnson on the field without a huge coverage sacrifice. Let's get into the whole conversation here. When Matt Milano comes back, and Matt Milano is healthy enough and ready to play 100% of the snaps on defense, can we just stop right there? He plays 100% of the snaps on defense. Matt Milano is one of the elite linebackers in the NFL, and he's the most experienced player on the team in the defense. I love what I'm seeing from Dorian Williams, except for last week. But Matt Milano plays 100% of the snaps when he's ready to go. I know he's a little out of sight, out of mind. He's one of the best 5 linebackers in the NFL. And when he's ready, I think the benefit of having depth that's gaining experience in Dorian Williams and even Balin Spector is that you don't have to speed up anything with Matt Milano. And if you want him to come in and ramp up incrementally each week, you use that to your advantage. But when he's ready to play 100% of the snaps, he plays 100% of the snaps. Secondly, is this whole 3 linebacker thing. The Bills have shown a clear reluctancy to do that. Snap here or there, but it's not part of what they want to be. I do think the idea is helped when you have Milano and Dorian Williams. Dorian Williams as a Sam linebacker, that would make sense to me. And what I would do, and this has been sent to me from other people as well, is if you do want to go 3 linebackers, I think there's a world where it's Williams, Milano, Bernard, and Taron Johnson becomes more of a box safety than a slot corner, and Hamlin is the player you drop off with Rapp as your deep safety. I think that's the best way to do it, because the hard part of this entire 3 linebacker conversation is I'm not taking Taron Johnson off the field. And they did when they ran one snap of 3 linebackers against Tennessee, and Balin Spector got cooked by Chig Okonkwo, the tight end, down the field. Taron Johnson came off the field for Balin Spector. Nobody, come on. That's not, the juice is not worth the squeeze there. Are you kidding me? So that's kind of the layer to the conversation I think is interesting. So main points, Milano, when he's ready to go, 100% of the snaps. If you go 3 linebackers, find a way for that 3rd linebacker to be Dorian Williams, bump Damar Hamlin. Taron Johnson kind of plays as a box safety with Rapp as your deep safety. Jonathan says, could you break down for us what the Bills did differently to limit Kenneth Walker compared to what we failed to do when we got gashed by Derrick Henry? Is this an encouraging sign for our run defense? Should there be a rematch with the Ravens in the playoffs? I'm going to go back to exactly what I've said the entire time with that Ravens game. It was completely game script dependent. The game got away from the Bills very quickly. They were in a deficit. The Ravens go 87 yards in their first play of the game. Offense wasn't moving. Bigger than anything the Bills did schematically or didn't do schematically, it was that the game script got away from them, and the Ravens never had to get out of their game plan. They could just pound Derrick Henry, and the Bills were in chase mode. And the biggest problem with the Bills' run defense in that game against Baltimore was the Bills' offense. They didn't score. That's a huge piece of this equation for the Bills structurally, how they choose to play defense with light boxes, and they want 2 things to be true. We want to take away your explosive plays down the field, and we want to get negative plays with our up-the-field style front, okay? And within that structure, they're going to concede rushing yards. They invite them. They say, here, you can have them. Now, they're not going to try to not stop the run, but they're not going to do anything to help it. The huge part of that equation is we think we can score points. And if we can score points and put some stress on you to keep up with us, you're not going to be able to do your normal stuff. You're going to have to get into a drop back passing game. The Bills never were able to get Baltimore to fall into that. So that's the biggest thing. It's how that game script unfolded that made it favorable for Baltimore to continue running the ball while the Bills weren't scoring points. It's game script. And every once in a while, this happens. And that's what happened that night. I don't think the Bills are going to get smoked by the Ravens if they play them again. And I think it is just as important for the offense to score and play complementary football as it is for the Bills to make schematic adjustments for how they defend the Baltimore Ravens. All right, folks, there you have it. Trade candidates, roster transition, a little herd mentality here in the middle of the week. Coming up next, we're going to start focusing in on this matchup against the Miami Dolphins. Crossover Thursday with Kyle Krabs. That's our next conversation, followed by my primer, getting us ready for Miami. Final thoughts if the Bills make a trade or anything like that. Of course, we'll have a special episode for that. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. Look forward to catching up with you again real soon.